All right, distance learners, it's Steve Biankowski, your civics teacher again. This lesson is going to be about an important Supreme Court case. This Supreme Court case is going to be called Dred Scott versus Sandford. One of the things we'll learn about is the highest court of the land, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has one major job. It tells us what the Constitution says. The Constitution is our rule book. It is our operating system. It's our manual about how our government's supposed to work. If you're ever confused, if there's an argument on what the Constitution means, the final referee on that is the United States Supreme Court. They say what the Constitution says and what the Constitution means. This case is going to be about citizenship. Since we just learned about citizenship, we'll look at this Supreme Court case first. It goes to the question of who's a citizen and who isn't. We're going to see Mr. Dred Scott was a slave. And we're going to have the Supreme Court decide whether slaves were citizens or not. Just as a guess, what do you think the Supreme Court's going to say? Do you have any idea whether they're going to say a slave is a citizen or not?
I would think they would say no.
We're going to see that the Supreme Court is going to say, Mr. Dred Scott, guess what? You are not a citizen because slaves are not citizens. Very unfortunate Supreme Court decision. People who've read and are familiar with the thousands of decisions the Supreme Court has made over 200 plus years, they're going to look at this as one of the Supreme Court's biggest mistakes. Now we'll fix it eventually, but the Supreme Court in this case is going to say, nope, Mr. Scott, you are not a citizen, you are a slave. All right, so the United States Supreme Court is the highest court in the land. Whatever it says goes. How does it work? There's 9 justices on the Supreme Court. They get the arguments, they vote, and whoever gets most votes wins. So if you get 5 of the 9 justices to make a decision and agree, that's the decision. And that's what they'll call it, a Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court, again, it's the final referee. It's the last court. It's the court of final appeals. When the Supreme Court says something, that's what goes. Then the entire legal system and the entire government follows the precedent set by that Supreme Court decision. So if the Supreme Court says A, all the courts and lawyers and police working in the United States have to follow that precedent of A. Whatever the Supreme Court says goes. A real quick one, just so you understand why you see this. These Supreme Court cases you'll recognize by the V. It'll be somebody v. somebody. Or you might see a business name or a government. What is the B? The B. There's no B. What does the V stand for, Abby?
Versus.
Versus. Versus means against. It's from the Latin. We see a lot of Latin in the legal profession, and this is just one of those cases. So somebody versus somebody else. Dred Scott versus Sandford. Brown versus Board of Education. United States versus Nixon. Whenever you see that V in there, it's going to be a Supreme Court case. All right. The importance of the Dred Scott case, it was all about deciding who's a citizen of the United States and who isn't. This case is going to run from the 1840s to 1850s. It's going to take a long time for this case to be determined. If we remember back from a couple lessons ago, slavery in the United States started in 1619. So really, as soon as Europeans start coming to the United States, slavery is a part of United States life. By 1857, when this case is ended, slavery is going to be practiced by the entirety of the southern United States. The northern states are going to be free states where slavery is not allowed. The southern states will be practicing slavery. It's important to understand a slave was basically treated as property with no rights of their own. They could be bought and sold. They didn't vote. They typically couldn't own property. They were restricted in where they could work, where they would go. In some states, it was illegal to teach slaves how to read, for example. So in general, each state was a little bit different, but in general, slaves were treated as property, and in really none of the southern states where slavery was practiced were they given a full range of legal or civil or human rights. The green states, the northern states, were free states. Slavery was illegal. These orange states are the southern states where slavery was practiced. The southern states knew as America grew, all these are territories and not states yet. The southern states were concerned that as the United States grew, there would be more free states than slave states, and then slavery would be abolished. So the South was really concerned and trying to make sure that slavery existed. So the South was trying to make sure slavery would be part of all these new states that the United States was creating. Their opponents in the North were on the other side. The opponents in the North were trying at least to limit slavery or get rid of slavery altogether. The Dred Scott decision is going to happen in 1857. This is when all these arguments are getting more and more heated, and we're leading to 1860 when President Abraham Lincoln is elected, which will bring us to war. But as we are leading up to the Civil War in 1860, the basic laydown is slavery is illegal in the North. Slavery is practiced in the South, and yeah, way out here, California, no slavery. And the North and the South are fighting about the expansion of slavery to all these territories, all these states that will eventually be created. All right, so who is Dred Scott? He was a slave, and his owner was a United States Army doctor. Anybody out there in the audience, military families? We were a military family. What did we do a lot as a military family?
Move.
We moved. I don't know how many times we moved. I can't count it up. I'm sure Abby in her life must have moved 4 or 5 times in less than 16 years. So people moved back then too. What was interesting about Dred Scott is his owner moved him from a slave state to a free state and a free territory. Illinois and Wisconsin were free. So Dred Scott says, you took me to free states. I should have been freed. So what does he do to solve this legal problem? Just like we do to solve legal problems today. He hires a lawyer and sues. He really didn't have money on his own. People helped him hire a lawyer, and they sued. This legal case goes on for quite some time and eventually gets to the Court of Final Appeal, the final referee, the United States Supreme Court. He's going to again argue that I was a slave who was brought to states where slavery was illegal. I should have been freed. Gets to the United States Supreme Court, and the United States Supreme Court just blows this decision. So finally they make a decision in 1857, and it's not even close. By a vote to 7-2, the Supreme Court says, Mr. Scott, you were never a citizen, you were not a citizen, and since you're not a citizen, you don't get the rights of citizens to do things like even bring this lawsuit. So sorry, you're a slave. You were never given full citizenship rights, to include being able to sue for your freedom. So sorry, you lose. You're not freed. The Chief Justice, out of the 9 justices, the Chief Justice is kind of like the boss of the Supreme Court. This man named, that's pronounced typically Tawney, Supreme Court Justice Tawney, writes the decision and basically says, hey, look, African Americans aren't included and never were intended to be included as citizens when the Constitution was written. So you were never a citizen, you can't be a citizen. The Constitution says you're not a citizen, so you can't sue. So yes, you're not free. You remain as a slave. You may not agree with it, but you understand the thought process of the Supreme Court at the time.
Yeah.
Hey, take a guess. Of these 9 people in the Supreme Court, how many of those people do you think own slaves?
Probably 7 of them.
Yes, like 6 of those Supreme Court justices come from Southern backgrounds and own slaves. I'm not saying that affected their decision making, but it doesn't take a lot of imagination to think if the Supreme Court justice is a Southerner who owns slaves, is he going to make a decision saying, hey, guess what? African Americans are full citizens, which would probably mean what? They shouldn't be held as slaves? Yes. And these are some of the reasons why historians today universally say this is one of the worst decisions in Supreme Court history. The impact is, of course, on the individual Dred Scott. He loses his case. He's not going to be freed. The impact on African Americans in the United States in 1857 is, you're all slaves, you're not citizens, you can't be freed, you can't have the right of full citizens, who at the time were really just white males. White females weren't full citizens at the time because they couldn't do things like, vote, so they weren't full citizens. But this decision denies African American males full citizenship rights. The North is generally furious about this decision. They think this decision is terrible. Abraham Lincoln and the brand new Republican Party are already anti-slavery, and this decision is one more thing they're going to use as ammunition in trying at least to limit slavery in the territories. The Republican Party, when it comes up, is going to be the anti-slavery party. And finally, the Dred Scott decision is going to be yet one more thing that pushes the country closer and closer to civil war. So in 1857, this decision is made, makes the North angry, celebrated by the South because they're going to maintain slavery for at least a few more years. Abraham Lincoln is elected in 1860. He and the Republicans come into power, and basically as soon as Lincoln's elected, the South starts rebelling and starts seceding from the United States, causing the United States Civil War. If you know your history, hopefully this isn't a spoiler alert. After the Civil War, the North, the United States wins, defeats the South, defeats the Confederacy. You know anything about the history of this picture? Who's there and where it happened?
That was when the South surrendered.
Absolutely. Do you know who these 2 people are? This is the Northern general who becomes president eventually, and this is the main Southern general. You remember their names from your history?
Was one of them Grant?
This is General Ulysses S. Grant. He becomes the senior commander of the United States Army during the Civil War. Big leader and big reason why the United States wins. And he's accepting the surrender of, hear his name a lot because people are complaining about statues and all that. It's a short name. It's not Key.
Not Key.
It's Lee.
Lee?
Robert E. Lee. So this is Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, where the final major battles of the Civil War are happening. And this is the formal surrender of the Confederate armies of Robert E. Lee to General Ulysses S. Grant, who after the war becomes elected president, serves 2 terms as president. So the United States defeats the Confederacy. As part of bringing the country back together, slavery is going to end, and we end slavery through an amendment. We're going to learn an amendment is a change to the Constitution. So the 13th Amendment, the 13th change to the Constitution, will make slavery illegal. It will end slavery. And the 14th Amendment is going to define citizenship to make sure that everybody understands that, yes, African Americans are citizens. So the 13th Amendment, bam, slavery is done. Neither slavery or involuntary servitude will exist within the United States, except as punishment for a crime. So the government can put you in jail and take away a lot of your rights if you're arrested for a crime. But slavery and involuntary servitude shall not exist in the United States. 13th Amendment, 1865, ends slavery. But then there's a problem. Slavery ended, and people sort of said, well, that means African Americans are real citizens and full citizens now, right? In the South, they weren't. The South continued to try to restrict their rights to include primarily voting rights, because voting is power. So in 1868, the 14th Amendment is going to say, hey, no kidding. These people are full citizens with full citizenship rights and equal protection under the law. So when you ask about, gee, where does citizenship come from? One of the big places where you look at what citizenship means is the 14th Amendment. It starts out right at the beginning. Bam! All persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States. So if you're born in the United States, guess what?
You're a citizen.
If you're naturalized, you're a
Citizen.
And these slaves, what were they? All born in the United States, so they are? Yeah, cool. Any questions?
No.
Who knows when you're going to see it? Have a great day, great evening. Enjoy your study and your continued online learning.